Welcome to our listeners. This is KSQD Santa Cruz. I'm your host, Keshav Batish, and I am very fortunate to interview the great musician, Joe La Barbera. There's a book that he put out with Charles Levin called Times Remembered, the final years of the Bill Evans Trio. And so we'll speak a little bit about that and also about Joe and his life and the music. So I want to start with, I guess, what formed you as a musician and as a human being. So I know you grew up in a musical family, right?
That is correct. A very close-knit family, very close-knit community.
Okay, and where was that community?
It's a town called Mount Morris, New York, which is in western New York State in what's known as the Genesee Valley because the Genesee River runs through there. It's approximately 36 miles south of Rochester, New York, and about 60 miles east of Buffalo.
Okay, and when you were growing up, you say there was a close-knit community and family, so was there a scene in that town as well?
Well, it wasn't like a thriving jazz scene, but as a matter of fact, we were very fortunate that there was a family that had a hotel, the Ladelfa family, and they brought big name entertainment through town. Now, unfortunately, my brothers and I were too young to go at the time, but Terry Gibbs played there and Gene Krupa played there. I actually got to see Gene for 5 minutes one afternoon at a matinee, but I was only 7 years old, so I really couldn't be there legally.
Dang.
A lot of people, Herb Ellis and Ray Brown and a group known as the Soft Winds, they played there. Quite a few well-known jazz bands played at this club, but as I say, we were not old enough to actually go there and listen. However, the owner of the hotel, Bob Ladelfa, became a friend of mine. Now, he was probably 20 years older than me, but he kind of took me under his wing. He was a good drummer, and he used to take me and my brothers all over western New York to hear live jazz. It could be as far away as Buffalo or Rochester, wherever there was something of interest going on, he would take us, and that's how we got our first exposure to top name live jazz.
That's beautiful. So it sounds like this person would you consider him one of your first mentors in the music?
Yeah, I guess I would. My father was absolutely my first mentor because he taught me how to play, he taught my brothers and I how to play. But it was beyond being a mentor, but he was my primary mentor, my father. And my parents would also take us to hear music when they could, but of course they were both busy raising three boys and keeping a family fed and sheltered. But Bob was certainly very important. Let me put him that way.
Yes, it sounds like it. I'm lucky to say that I grew up in a musical family myself. So to have a close relation that introduced you to this art is it's priceless.
I agree totally.
So at a certain point, you ended up at Berklee College of Music, right?
That is correct.
Okay, and how long did you spend there?
I was there for 3 semesters. I started in September of 1966, and I left in January or December of 67.
Okay. That's a very important year in this music, or between from I think 59 to 67. Did you end up seeing like Train and let's see, Dave Brubeck?
Well, we had seen John Coltrane and Dave Brubeck back in Rochester, New York. So John Coltrane came through town in 1961, and we went to see that band. It was certainly an eye-opener. Dave Brubeck also came to Rochester and played at the Eastman Theater, as did Stan Getz on another occasion. So we saw those 3 artists. My parents took us to New York City in 1962. I think it was 62, the World's Fair. Mm. And it might have been 60. I can't remember now exactly. And while we were there, my brothers and I took the bus in to Manhattan and caught Dizzy Gillespie at the original Birdland 3 nights in a row. So that was quite an experience.
Dang, that's like a baptism. Oh, that's gorgeous. And so, okay, so your first visit to New York was in the early '60s, and you ended up returning to New York after Berkeley, right?
Well, not quite. After Berkeley, I was drafted into the Army. I did 2 years in the Army. When I came out of the Army, I worked with Woody Herman's band for a year. So that was on the road. I was still living in Western New York. I had moved to Rochester. Then after that job, I joined Chuck Mangione, who was also from Rochester. So that was 4 years with Chuck, also living in the Western New York area. And then in 1976, I decided to move to New York City. So that's when I left Chuck. I moved to New York and started to just see what I could do in that metropolis, and things worked out pretty well. I freelanced around New York for, 76 and 77. Yeah. And then 78 also playing with, I played with Jim Hall. I played with Art Farmer, Phil Woods, Bob Brookmeyer, just a slew of older, experienced players. I was in Gary Burton's band for 1 year, just shy of a year, I think, with John Schofield and Steve Swallow. That was a really good band. And then also played a lot with Mike and Randy Brecker and Hal Galper. And then in late 1978, Bill Evans was looking for a drummer, and I went over and auditioned, and I got that gig. So that lasted from January of 79 until September of 1980 when Bill passed.
Okay. And was that the longest you had been in a group that far?
Well, Chuck Mangione would have been the longest, right? 4 years.
4 years, okay.
Yeah, and then so Chuck by far was the longest. But Chuck, we were personal friends, and I felt I felt a commitment to that band. But I also felt that same commitment with Bill immediately, and that music spoke right to my heart. But Bill was not quite 2 years. I think that was shy by 3 months.
Okay, and the bassist with you all at that point was Mark, right?
Mark Johnson was on bass. That's exactly right.
Okay. And, well, I was struck by many things in the book about your time with Bill Evans, but one thing I wanted to ask you about was your experience specifically in resonance with others who have played with greats who say that the music was, rarely rehearsed and often passed out a moment before it was played. Or chosen or thought of. So what can you speak to regarding the spontaneity of this art form in general, certainly through experiences with Bill Evans and others, and how it's informed your participation, not just in the music, but also just moving through life?
That's a very good question. Bill Evans was certainly like that. He wanted a fresh approach. When he reorganized the trio, he was not looking for a recreation of the last band. He wanted you to bring what you had to offer to the music. And he also made the assumption, and correctly, that whoever was going to be auditioning for his band would have taken the time to do the homework and listen to Bill Evans. You don't have to know the arrangements exactly, but you have to have an understanding of the direction that he was after and the direction that he had achieved, and be respectful of that. So I had been listening to Bill Evans since I was 12 years old. I think my brother brought a jazz track home around that time when I was 12. So Bill was on that album with Miles. So yes, Bill's desire with a group was simply to have a commitment from two other musicians who wanted to grow together. That's exactly how Bill and Scott LaFaro and Paul Motian achieved all the groundbreaking innovations in trio playing that they achieved by simply committing to being together and working together, and eventually coming across something new to offer.
Well, in those moments that you did play with Bill, and in the stories I read in the book, it seems like there was a lightness to it. what also struck me was you said that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm going to be paraphrasing, that whereas not every night necessarily felt like a full-on, like there was always a flow, but there was also kind of a knowing that you'd make it through the other side. A certain amount of like focus, and you speak of Bill's ability to be able to kind of turn on that switch to focus. Do you remember kind of feeling that you had changed after that band, or was there something like an instinct that developed after that band that wasn't necessarily there before?
I absolutely changed after that band, but Bill, I think what you're referring to there is, I was frustrated at a certain point not being able to achieve the level that I wanted to achieve every night. And Bill could sense my frustration, and he pulled me aside and said, every night can't possibly be at the peak, because if that was the case, then the peak would become the norm and we'd have to raise that bar, a little further up. He said, I trust in your ability and Mark's ability, and we're always going to do our professional best, and it's always going to be good and at a very high level. Certain times, things are going to really click, and it's going to be what you're after, but you can't possibly expect it realistically night after night after night. And he was absolutely right. So that helped me a great deal. Bill's ability to, and this is his term, flip a switch to get into creativity mode was built on hours and hours of working toward that total concentration, so that he was not distracted by anything, and he could just put all of his energy into the music, and particularly into the improvisation, which is the good stuff as far as we're all concerned.
Yeah, man. Absolutely. Do you find today playing live music with others a sort of meditative experience?
Always. I've always felt that. And it doesn't have to be Bill Evans, it doesn't have to be John Coltrane or Miles Davis. You can achieve that with whoever you're playing with, as long as everyone is totally focused and working toward making music. It's totally achievable, and I felt it over and over. I feel it almost all the time when I'm playing.
That's beautiful, man. I mean, I hear it in your sound. I want to pivot to more drummer-specific questions. And in some senses, this is also maybe more generally in terms of musical development. Specifically, I'm interested in your thoughts on theory versus practice. How much do you find that theory helps you? And I guess in the case of drums, theory would be like rudiments and general facility around the drums. And how much of it, of your musical development, comes from just playing out and just working it out on the bandstand?
Without a doubt, I need that theoretical approach. I need to maintain a certain level of ability. It's not like I'm practicing hours a day anymore, but I did that in my youth, as did Bill, as did so many other greats. But I was practicing before you called. I have to keep my hands loose. And the best way to do it for me is to work through snare drum etudes or snare drum exercise books, just to keep those hands limber. As you get older, things start to squeak and get rusty in places. So you have to concentrate and work at keeping them fluid.
Yeah.
So that works for me. And when you do that, then in the heat of the moment, you won't be caught out unable to complete a thought at the drums or at any instrument, because you will have already gone through a combination technically that's going to make it easier for you to pull off that idea that you just heard in your head.
Okay, right on. I love that. As a drummer, do you hear yourself express ideas in a so-called tonal manner as well as percussive? And furthermore, do you see a difference between rhythm and melody/harmony?
Oh, I like that I like that analogy. So as far as the tonal thing, I wouldn't use the word tonal. I would say melodic because, I'm limited to 4 basic tones from the drums, right? Bass drum, 2 tom-toms, and a snare drum. Plus the cymbals are an added color. But I absolutely strive for melodic invention or melodic ideas when I'm playing. And that is because I've listened to a lot of drummers, but I've also listened a lot to piano players and tenor players and trumpet players, guitar players, bass players. Everybody that plays jazz, I've listened to intently. So the idea was to absorb some of their melodic nature that I could express at the drums. And I absolutely equate harmony with rhythm because it's what we have to work with, right?
Yes.
We're limited in a certain sense because we don't have that ability, but it frees us up to concentrate more on rhythmic ideas and rhythmic concepts. And there's a way to do it that can get an intelligent idea across in a manner that isn't repetitive and in a manner that hasn't been done a million times before. So yes, I think of rhythm as my harmony.
You're reminding me of a quote that I saw in an interview of the great pianist Andrew Hill.
Mm-hmm.
I think he grew up in the Chicago area and ended up subbing for Charlie Parker's band. And he said he ended up asking Bird about his approach. And Bird says that I don't see any difference between melody and rhythm. To him, it was just like all at once.
Mm.
So I think it's beautiful, and in a sense it's freeing because, as you had said about the theory, once you've got all that practice and looseness, then you can kind of just be in the moment and not having to be necessarily cognizant of just rhythm or just harmony,
Yes, I absolutely agree. There's a quote in the book that I put in from Bill Evans where he said, you need to let your intuition guide your knowledge. So the knowledge part is all the hard work you put in on your instrument and on learning music and learning theory and understanding how music is made and how a solo is put together. So that's your knowledge base, which the more you work at it, the bigger it is. Then your intuition is what allows you to just, take a chance, try something, because you're not going to fall flat. And if you do, you can correct it in a second. Charlie Parker always said, jazz is a series of miraculous recoveries.
Man, I never heard that quote before. That's beautiful.
Oh, yeah, that's Bird. And, we're all just doing that. We're all trying things. And what I love about Bird, what I love about Sonny and Bill and Miles is that they're just going where their mind or their intuition is taking them. They're not restricted, but they've got a lot to back it up.
Indeed. Well, on your experiences in playing with many different folks, do you find smaller or large ensemble situations more satisfying to participate in one or the other? Do you find that there's a difference in how you approach playing with more people than less?
Well, I'll start with that last question. There's absolutely a difference between playing with a big band or a large ensemble as opposed to a quintet or a trio. There's also a lot of similarities, but in terms of the larger ensemble, you've got more people to be aware of. And by aware, I mean you have to make certain that everybody in that band knows where the time is, know where you're putting that beat. There can be no mistake. It has to be crystal clear. So that's one thing. Of course, the volume is going to be different too. I mean, I wouldn't play as loud, let's say, in a trio as I would in a big band. But at the same time, there were a lot of similarities between like Woody's band and Bill Evans' trio, because what you've got is a repertoire of songs with arrangements. And there are certain figures that need to be tended to in both, in the trio and in the big band. And then there's also there has to be a wide range of dynamics. It can't just be loud and it can't just be soft. Bill Evans allowed me that. He gave me that liberty to play as forcefully and as loud as I needed to play, as long as I was respectful of the music and didn't stay up there. So we enjoyed that kind of a musical freedom, and Mark as well, and that's a beautiful thing. In a bigger band, it's written on the arrangement, but it's certainly open to interpretation as to how loud you want to play something or how you want to interpret a figure. Does that answer that question?
Absolutely. And I have a follow-up to that in terms of a confluence of both music and language. And because I've always thought that drums have a sort of poetry to them, because we have limitation. At the same time, that kind of enables us to be very creative with our limitations. And I know there's history and anchoring of that within like the talking drum of Africa and drums from India. So have you found connections like that?
I think drums are fortunate in that they have a direct communication with even the average person,
Yes.
On the street. They hear drumming and they respond to it. It's primal, right? And then if you can be creative with it, you can keep someone's attention and you can help the music to move forward. That's always been my goal, to just try to be supportive, but at the same time, keep that music moving ahead and help the soloist sound as good as he or she possibly can.
Absolutely. Well, I want to close up our time together by asking you, what keeps you going? What music do you listen to these days? And who do you admire on your instrument and on other instruments as well?
Oh man, I admire so many. I mean, I get CDs all the time. My students send me their CDs, my former students. What keeps me going, though, is the love of this music. It hasn't changed one bit since the time I was a kid. I don't mind dragging my drums to a club and setting them up and playing and tearing them down and bringing them home. That doesn't bother me. I look forward to playing with new people. I love playing with younger musicians because they have an energy, and I have something that I can offer them, and they certainly have a lot that they can offer me. It's just a love of the music. It keeps me going, and I get more out of it than I put in. Believe me, it's always been a payoff much greater than what I put into it.
That's beautiful, man. Well, that's about it, Joe. I want to thank you for your time and for your thoughts on the beauty that this music offers, and certainly you've offered much to it and continue to. So I hope to hear you live sometime soon, man.
Come on up to San Francisco on Wednesday. I'm playing up there with Bijan Tagarvi and Will Lyle. It's a group called Triogram. These are really good young players.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Oh, what venue are you playing?
The Black Cat.
Oh, that's a sweet spot. Have you played there before?
Never. I haven't been to San Francisco in years to play, so I'm kind of excited.
Okay, I think you're going to dig it. It's got a cool vibe from what I've heard.
All right.
Okay, and finally, I have a message from a friend of mine, Hafiz Modirzadeh.
Mm-hmm.
He says hello and was remembering you when y'all played together in a band with a person named Chi, I believe.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Damn, that's a long time ago. Well, please give my regards back. Wow.
Yeah, man. He remembered you very fondly, and he was like, "Oh man, you're gonna interview Joe? Well, give him my best."
That was really stretching my brain, because that was completely different music, and I really enjoyed the band. So please, yes, absolutely, give my best regards back.
You got it, man. Okay. Well, again, thank you for your time, and man, I'll see you Wednesday.
Oh, great. I look forward to meeting you in person.
Okay. Well, cheers, man, and have a safe travel up here.
Okay. See you soon.
Okay. Peace.